The Digital India program recently celebrated 7 years of its launch. CNBC-TV18 hosted Digital India Vision 7.0, a forum to celebrate India's digital success stories, discuss the key sectors that are utilizing digital technology to scale up their businesses, and deliberate on how technology can be further adopted and deployed in every sphere, aiding India to become a global leader in advanced digital technologies. Among other key conversations, the event also had industry experts converge for a power-packed discussion, focusing on how organizations can adopt agile security testing methods based on automation in a panel discussion titled Securing the Cashless Payment Ecosystem.
The topic of this discussion is securing the digital or the cashless payment ecosystem in India. And, through this evening, we've heard fabulous stories, and we can be nothing but proud of what India has achieved. When it comes to the digital payment ecosystem, we are the pride of the world in real-time payments. 6 billion transactions clocked in July alone through UPI. The Bharat Bill Payment System, the National Electronic Toll Collection, all of that, are stories to write home about. What I do want to focus on is how cashless really has India become today, spurred by demonetization and then the pandemic. But when it comes to coming to the heart of India, the hinterlands, the last pin code, how far have we come? What really stands out to you, Abhijit, in India's digital payment journey so far?
Thanks so much for having me here. It's a great question. And I think, first of all, we are at the forefront of the world. There's no question about it. And it's been a pretty amazing journey. And I think we're also in the very first innings. So when we think about the hinterlands or rural India or kind of the underserved sectors, we're ready for that now. I came to Bangalore 17 years ago from Silicon Valley. And then as in now, I believe that the technology revolution was imminent. It's taken a while for the foundations and the building blocks to develop. You needed the first 100 and the first 200 million to kind of get on board for us to understand how this works, how we calibrate, make sure this is secure, make sure this is the ecosystem works together. Now it's time for the next 400 million, right? And I think once and there's two things that have happened that I think actually make this that moment that we've been waiting for. First of all, on the demand side, those underserved sectors who've never had access is exceptionally important, never had access to any of these services or the digital economy or whatever. Forget payments. That's just an enabler of something bigger. Access is now there, and it's been solved because data networks, platforms, WhatsApp is one of those platforms, are in people's pockets. On the supply side, the service providers who've never been able to reach these people, there's ultimately been a ceiling to how far we could get in a scalable and economically viable way. They're ready, and they're partnering with the tech ecosystem to build out and reimagine digital journeys, right? And these digital journeys, especially powered by India Stack, which is revolutionary, can just re-engineer old processes that have had massive friction and have kept us from getting to where we wanted to get to.
All right, let me also bring in Ms. Arundhati Bhattacharya, who's joining us virtually, aptly so, on a digital panel. We just heard Amitabh Khan say there is value in volumes. Let me ask you then, how do we get those volumes? How do we expand these services, ensure that, the achievements we've had so far in digital payments are accessible to that last mile customer? And you bring your experience both from the financial institution side, which of course is a huge role to play, and also now from the tech side. What to your mind are some of the low-hanging fruits perhaps to tap?
I think, one of the first things that we need to understand very clearly is what started off this digital revolution. The first thing I think that really started it off, we'd been trying it for a very long while, but it got really kicked off with the UIDAI, which is the KYC that enabled us to open accounts in the very, remote areas of India. Of course, UIDAI was one of the things. The other things, of course, as we call it, the Jam Trinity, which is the mobiles, the connectivity that was there, and then the Jan Dhan accounts. So I think people getting into the first and foremost step was people getting into the banking system, into the formal channels. Now, when the Jan Dhan accounts were being actually, opened, it was also very clear that it was important for people to have access, and brick and mortar banks were not that many. And therefore, what was created was the ecosystem of POS machines. So people could go there and swipe their cards and then get either make payments or receive cash. Both ways. It worked both ways. The third step, of course, was the QR codes. The Bharat QR codes, the Bhim UPI app that came about, and UPI, as we all know, is one of the best platforms, payment platforms in the world today. Definitely something that other countries want to emulate, because this is something that's working at scale. You were talking about the last mile. If we are handling 6 billion payments in 1 month, I think the last mile is not very far off. In the sense, people are already comfortable about using it. And as smartphones become cheaper and cheaper, using the QR code, anybody, anywhere can make payments. As long as you have mobile connectivity and as long as you are on the UPI platform, making of payments is not a problem at all. And unlike what we used to believe initially, that the rural masses would not, take to it or would not accept it, that is not the case at all. Because today you can actually make payment for the greengrocer, for anybody that you want, or with the QR code in any part of the country. I think, it's a phenomenal revolution that we have seen. Probably it's been speeded up, first by demonetization and second by the pandemic. But it is here to stay. It is something that people have accepted. People now have got used to it. They see how easy it is to transact. They don't want to go back to those days when they had to count cash, they had to keep it safe, they had to go to a bank to deposit it. They are no longer interested in that. That being the case, I think, it's very important for us to understand that the last mile is not far off. The last mile depends merely on the infrastructure, that is the connectivity. If the mobile connectivity is there, the spread of the payment system is become so simple, anybody and everybody can do it. It will happen.
All right, so we have about 760 million odd smartphones now. Internet penetration is deep. And as Ms. Bhattacharya puts it, the last mile is not too far away. But Nitin, let me get some numbers from you then. What we saw happen during the pandemic, that surge in digital adoption, is that trend sustaining? What has been your experience of the country's largest bank by far?
No, much of that is sustainable and probably irreversible also. But it's just that many people who were forced into digital payments or digital transactions and still find any amount of friction will have the tendency to go back. Okay, so we have seen the depth of transactions going up during the pandemic. People like us have started to do 10x of the transactions or 5x of the transactions that we were doing earlier. The width has also expanded, which is the new users, but I think it's largely a longish tail with not too much depth. So you would have a lot of people with maybe 1, 2, 3 transactions a month, and I'm talking about UPI only. So there is scope to increase the depth as much as it is to increase the width. But I think one of the things that has been realized over time is that people like us, people who use their bank accounts for what they earn, whether it's business income or salaried income, we have a tendency to use our bank accounts, and that is what we've done. But people who don't use their bank accounts to earn, they earn in cash. It is hard for them to go and deposit the cash in their bank account and then start using a digital payment. So they will always earn in cash and burn in cash. And we see this time and again in the last mile or, let's say the lower income categories where the earnings are still in cash. And I think that is the place where we need to tackle and do something about, because if the payments on a daily basis or monthly basis or weekly basis are being paid out in cash, then, there is no incentive for anybody to go and first deposit that into a bank account and then, use digital payments. So I think the second or the third wave has perhaps brought us to this level of just under 300 million users. But the next wave of the next 100 million, 150 million will need some structural level changes. Just more availability is probably not going to solve that problem. But coming back to the question on banks, I think banks are certainly seeing, if you look at any banks which are reporting their digital transactions, it's been just going up year after year and not restricted to only digital payments or UPI, but across all payment categories. So we are seeing reduction in the check transactions. We've seen reduction in ATM transactions, partly for the fact that now we have a 2,000 rupee denominated currency note also, which wasn't there earlier. But in general, most banks are upwards of 75 to 80% digital transactions, which is heartening, and it is going up every year.
And Akhil, a quick number from you at Bank of Baroda. What is the percentage of transactions that are done digitally today versus physically?
91% is done.
91% of all transactions recorded at Bank of Baroda are done digitally today.
That's right. So 91% of all customer-originated transactions are done digitally, and this includes, of course, all digital modes, your IMPS, UPI, NEFT, debit cards. So that's there.
Okay, interesting you bring up cards because I was going to Aditya next. You know, in this increasingly digital world, what is the future of plastic? And I know you say MasterCard is not just a cards company, it's a payment technology company. But inherently, how are you pivoting this business? What do you think is going to be the future where people may not even be swiping their cards anymore, they're just entering some numbers online?
Thank you very much. I think that's a brilliant question. See, it's very, very clear from all what my panelists have just said that the cashless movement is ahead. I think the first thing we've got to recognize is that cards was, and probably, I hope, will remain the first non-cash option. Okay, so that's the first thing out of the way. The second very important thing is that we must recognize cards are not competing. We are not competing with other options. And there is no one option that can digitize the whole country or the whole payment ecosystem of the country.
Kush, you know, one of the important pieces of this puzzle is merchants and bringing them online, bringing them into the digital fold. In a highly organized country like India, where Kirana still perhaps operate in cash, what has the adoption rate been like? And, you know, with some of the initiatives of the government, of the regulator, what sort of adoption rates are you going to see in the future? What's your, expectation?
I think I would say that most of us are extremely fortunate to be in this digital journey, payments, journey for India, because I feel this is the best time to be, for us to being around. So we guys have been, in that sense, focused only at merchants and digitizing merchants for over 10 years now. And, I could tell you that my own personal experience that 10 years ago, we tried selling a point of sale terminal to a large merchant in, I'm saying like tier A city, right? And the guy would reluctantly sign up for it. And half of the times, the guy would actually keep it in a drawer, saying that, if the guy doesn't have cash, and the customer doesn't have cash, and it's insistent on paying on a card.
And burn in cash.
Right? So is when I'm going to pull this out. So it was like a, necessary evil in the merchant's life. And it was like brute force sales. But cut to, 2020, what I have seen in the last 10 years is that I'm no longer talking about that, a metropolitan city merchant. Now I'm actually talking about maybe, let's say, a tier 3, tier 4 market merchant, like, for example, Rajasthan as a market. Right? I'm not talking about a merchant in Jaipur. I'm talking about a merchant in Bikaner for a minute, right? Or I'm talking about a merchant in a place like Warangal, down south. That merchant today signs up with us. That merchant wants a point of sale terminal. That merchant wants a link-based payment. That merchant wants a QR code. The merchant wants everything. So I feel the way the retailer community has embraced, this whole, kind of wave of going digital when it comes to, driving more footfalls, getting more sales has been phenomenal. I've realized that, they feel that there are all these impediments that come with, handling cash and depositing cash and cost of cash and stuff like that. So I feel that we're just about still warming up. If you look at the landscape of India, it's got 30, 40, 50 million merchants, very large, base.
And how many of them are online now?
Online is also, again, though it contributes to about 25% of, the kind of volumes that come out. But now I think the difference is that there is, the lines are blurring. There is no real difference between online and offline. We have a network of about some 800,000 plus merchants. And more than half of them now already have an omni-channel play. They have an online and offline both.
I think the point that I made earlier, that if we are really serious about the next 100, 150 million users coming in digital payments, whether on the cards network or on UPI or any other form, much of the UPI growth has happened because of the pricing. We shouldn't deny that. Now, if that is important for the next wave,